Hello again! In case you missed the previous video, Lego is literally the best toy ever invented. I've wanted the awesome Evil books from the Nexo Knights for quite some time, but sadly I was about 6 years late to the store. And since Amazon doesn't quite work in my godforsaken country, I'm yet again forced to face dangerous working conditions in order to fabricate my own toys for children. Last week I made the Book of Monsters, and now we're finally taking a look at the Book of Chaos. As I mentioned before, the skeleton minifig is one of my favorites, so as soon as I looked at the awesome design from the Book of Chaos, I just had to build it. In this case, I had to take a lot more liberties with the design. As you can see, the original piece is transparent. I initially thought I could maybe make it out of acrylic or some other sort of very thick plastic. In the end, and after literal weeks of thought, I just decided to make it out of regular MDF and think of something along the way. First, I printed out black and white versions of the cover layers to glue on top of the MDF and use as reference for the scroll zone. The skull and centerpiece would rest on the bottom layer, and the regular wood part on top would be the non-transparent sections. Making the text block is boring as always. The page size was also about a quarter of an A4 page, just like the Book of Monsters. And I found a really cool looking golden metallic cardboard for the endings of the text block. Just like before, I use a mix of silicone and starch to make my molds. Due to the latest virus apocalypse, getting materials has become either kind of difficult or very expensive. I used a couple of Lego pieces to make boxes, obviously, and then place the silicone starch mix on them. Finally, you just press the original corner pieces into that. I already had the corners made in a laser cutter before. These cheapest molds are actually quite good at picking up the details of the original pieces. To make the skull that goes in the middle of the cover, I use a Sculpting. I was going to make the face very similar to the Lego skull design, but in the end I decided to make it look a little bit more angry and spooky, so I added a couple of eyebrows. The skull was ready, and here's where the disaster begins. We tried to use a new oven that we have never before tried with Sculpting. So we just calculated the time using the tables on the internet and left it. And had to come running after maybe half of the time because there was a lot of smoke coming out of our kitchen. This is how the piece came in, and this is the almost radioactive waste that came out. Well, after it stopped smoking and bubbling. As you can see, it was almost completely burnt. At that point I was like really sad and angry. It took me several hours to make the skull, and I really didn't have time to remake everything from scratch. But after looking at it a couple more times, I was like, I always go for creepier, more messed up versions of all the things I make, and this skull already looks really creepy and messed up. It was a little bit misshapen on one side, so it didn't quite fit into the centerpiece, but that was easily fixed with a bit of 2-part epoxy clay like that. So, after not too long, the skull was brought back from trash status to a state of a perfectly reasonable Lego skull. After that, I just added some paint so no one will ever know about the horrors of the untested oven. I originally thought about just making the decorations around the skull out of MDF, sand it very well and paint it gold, but then, as I usually do, decided to make my life more difficult and cover the whole thing with metal. I had a couple of very thin golden pieces of metal for the corners, which was very convenient, but sadly it was not enough for the circle. So I went to my scrap metal heap and looked for something that I could use that was not too rusty. I decided to go with a piece of roofing water channel. There's a lot of roofing materials in these books. I printed out the pieces and marked it on top of the metal and started grinding away. And of course, because nothing can be easy, when I was ready to take out my Dremel and use the small grinding wheel to finish up, I realized I was completely out of the tiny metal grinding discs. And obviously, due to me living in a hellhole, finding replacements would have taken me several days, if at all possible. So I said to the hell with it, and I had to turn my angle grinder into a table grinder. Luckily here in South America we have no sense of self-preservation. It kinda worked, it's not perfect at all, but if you don't get too close to the round parts, you can't even notice how they are totally different. I was thinking of leaving everything in its original silver color, but I had a decent golden paint for metal, so I went with that. So here comes the part where I had to deal with the transparent cover that was not really transparent. My first thought was to draw something similar to the contents of the Lego piece like over here, but I didn't think that would look very good. So the second idea was to write some sort of magical looking glyphs, as if that was the first page of the book. I thought that would look nice, but I didn't know what to write until I googled Lego Magic Scroll, and this beautiful perfect piece showed up, so that solved my magical spell problem. I just eyeballed the whole thing so that a piece of the spell would be on top and the other half would cover the bottom part. I was starting to think to add a small thin layer of semi-transparent resin so that the spell wouldn't be so bright, but truth is, this project had taken me about 10 months up until then, due to a variety of misadventures during 2020, so I thought to myself, you know what, maybe I don't have to think about solutions to problems that don't need to exist in the first place. So finally, after so many problems, all parts were finally done. Now that all the parts are ready, it's time to put it all together. Since the original Lego piece looks golden all around, I decided to paint the leather golden too. I also decided to place the round head nails on the holes on the corners, since they fit perfectly instead of the center like in the original book. And to finish things up, I went with 2 straps on the side, just like the Book of Monsters, so they would match. Since the spell's background was black, I also used black straps and left the nails golden. And there you go, it's finally done. So, what have we learned? Well, so many things. First of all, do not trust untested ovens or materials or paint. Always check if you have consumables for your tools before it's too late during the weekend, and try not to live in South America, but I guess that's just good advice for any aspect of life. Another thing I completely forgot are these thingies over here. Well, I remember making them, but I must have thrown them away along with the rest of the pieces after I cut the covers, and I just realized that I was missing them when I was editing this video. In the end, the book came out pretty decent. If you're not too preoccupied with perfect details and don't have the original piece to compare it with. But hey, what's done, it's done. And even though I don't have the original tiny Lego because I was like 6 years late to the store, I still have my ultra realistic heavy Lego book, which makes me very happy. And my house only smelled like burnt plastic for a couple of days. Bye!